He's not somebody that's going to hide details. He's not somebody that's going to make excuses. And we heard that in the press conference yesterday when he's talking about all of these injuries. But at no point did he say, feel sorry for us.
No.
He said, here's who's stepping up.
Yeah.
Here's who's getting incorporated. And plus, guys, guess what? That 4-game window, we're getting pretty close to.
Mm-hmm.
And we can bring a lot of these red shirts in and not abandon their career.
Yeah.
These guys fight. They fight for the University of Nebraska.
They get through Purdue, and they can start bringing these guys in and without burning their red shirts, right? So help is on the way. Reinforcements are on the way. I don't know what's going to look like, right? But he named off 6 or 7 guys, just boom, 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 right in a row of that they really like how they're looking, but they don't want to burn their red shirts. And so they I think are going to play quite a bit because, I mean, we can just start getting into it now. They're going to have to. They are running out of bodies, especially on that offensive side of the ball. I mean, if you hadn't heard, Ethan Piper, Turner Corcoran out for the year. That's bad. Newelly out for at least a couple weeks. So that's 60% of your offensive line right there. Gone. Just up in smoke. In these 2 games.
It's a snap of a finger.
In these 2 games that are probably the 2 most important games
Thank
of the
goodness
season.
Ben Scott doesn't look like a long-term injury.
That it looked like I think it sounds like he's going to play this week. He didn't get brought up in that group. Billy Kemp's going to be out for a couple weeks, so that's a different, position.
Maybe
group.
even more.
Yeah, he said multiple weeks. Yeah, he said multiple weeks. Newelly, he said a couple weeks. So you're missing for the next 2 weeks, the most important games of your season. You're missing 60% of your offensive line, your starting offensive line.
But the good news is,
so you got Teddy Prohaska,
right? You have a lot of guys underneath
Justin
that you
Evans
expect things from.
Yeah, Justin Evans Jenkins, who
seems to be really liked around that room.
Yeah, he had been pushing for playing time already. He just happened to be behind some guys that they liked at those guard and center spots. All of a sudden, he's pressed into action. So you feel okay maybe about Evans Jenkins, and then you're going to have to get like Henry Lutovsky's going to have to play, especially in these next couple of weeks when Newelly's still out.
And when you can't bring up Sledge yet or Gatula yet.
So they have to get through this week. If they can get through this week, and then Sledge and Gatula can kind of provide some reinforcements, and then hopefully you get Newelly
just some
back.
Depth, right?
Yeah. So kind of like Coach Rhule was saying, not necessarily rotation guys, but guys that you can bring in as, that jumbo tight end set or on PAT, so that you don't have to have your main starters out there all the time.
You're not turning the healthy O linemen into workhorses.
Yeah, right. You don't want to run those guys into the ground, right? So, I mean, it's going to be really interesting over the next couple of weeks as we see a bunch of different guys. And I'm wondering if we'll be able to see it turn into something like we have on the defense. I'm a little hesitant, right? But honest to God, there's probably 2 or 3 times every week. And listen, I pay a lot of attention to this football team. We kind of do it for a living, right?
We do?
A little bit, yeah. And there are 2 or 3 times every week when somebody on defense makes a play, and I'm like, who is that? And I'm not embarrassed to say it because they play so when James Williams is making the first sack he made, I was like, I don't think I know who that is. And I'm just looking. I'm trying to.
I heard Jamison Williams when I first.
That's what I thought too.
Connected the name,
yeah.
And I'm like, since when did we have Detroit's wide receiver? I guess he got suspended, so maybe they demoted him back to college, and
he
they
got
said,
relegated.
Hey, you actually have to play Big Ten West football. So that's your
the ultimate football punishment.
Football punishment.
That's your football purgatory is coming to the Big Ten West. No, but I'm sitting there and I see this dude make a play. I go, 90? Who is that? And, I feel like when I'm at high school football games early in the season and I'm going through the, the little paper roster that they hand out, I'm like, who is that guy for Lincoln Southwest? I don't know who that is.
Well, I'll tell you, too, with James Williams, I'm thinking Jamison Williams.
I know
in my head all the time now. I shouldn't have. I retooled my brain to say the right name, and now I just got back into a poor habit. It's like when you bite your fingernails or something. You're like, no, I'm not going to do it anymore. And then at some point you just do.
They do it one time and you're back in the thing.
Yeah. Boys Down Bad, a podcast on our network, actually did an interview with Williams before the season. And we got to learn a little bit more about him. JUCO guy came in for a camp, impressed TK. And basically Knighton was like, yeah, you're going to need to stick around and talk to Coach Rhule. And he's like, okay, that sounds good to me. And Coach Rhule's like, yeah, we're going to need you to come to Nebraska. And he's like, where do I sign?
Yeah, I mean, he had little to no recruiting buzz coming out of high school or out of JUCO. He's a Missouri guy originally, I think. And
M-I-Z? Wrong game.
They're what I like about the James Williams thing is he's a very good example of a couple things. Number one, that when they say something, they mean it, right? He's a really good example of Coach Rhule talking about how, there's guys that we really like that are, haven't played yet, that we're about to bring up and things like that. So when he goes off on yesterday and starts listing off these names of guys that he thinks are really good already and that he's really excited to get on the field and waiting till they don't burn their red shirt, I believe him because I just saw it in this dude that was on scout team 3 days before the game.
Mm-hmm.
And
sometimes I think the hand is forced a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. On the offensive side of the ball, especially. Defense, not really. I mean, they've had some injuries on defense.
Yeah, fair.
But a lot of that's just Tony White doing Tony White stuff, I guess. Or, give Terrence Knighton credit, give Dvorak credit, give Coop credit, all those guys on the defense side of the ball. On the offensive side of the ball, their hand's been forced, right? I mean, let's just run down the MASH unit real quick here. So you're missing
there's
two linemen for the rest of the season. You're missing 3 of your top 4 wide receivers for the rest of the season. I'm counting Xavier Betts in there because he was a top 4 coming in. And you're missing the 4th one for at least for the next several weeks. You're down your top 2 running backs for the rest of the season. You're on a backup quarterback who maybe is the starter now, but he's not the guy you thought was going to start the season. You're down a tight end that you thought was going to be important to the year. Who do we have left? That's every position group, right? Is down at least a starter level player at every single position group. That's crazy. Like, I don't even know what to do with this offense because it's been ugly.
I don't think anybody knows.
No, it's because it's ugly, right? And you want to be critical.
Marcus Satterfield, and you try to be critical toward him, but at the same time, it's like, do you want to pick up that playbook and try yourself? Because it can't be easy.
No.
When you're recycling. You're throwing a guy in the trash can this week because he's injured, and then you pull him back out when he's healthy, and then, oh, wait, the can is actually still a little bit wrinkly, and so, like, this isn't working just right with this player. This isn't working just right with that player. Oh, I didn't want the Dr. Chill. I wanted the Dr. Pepper, and, now we have the backup in here.
I was a big Diet Dr. Thunder guy, personally.
Oh, not too shabby. I actually don't mind off-brand.
No, it's really not bad.
But
some of them.
We're so overly critical to just bounce right on top of Marcus Satterfield for play calling, and some is justified.
Yeah, sure.
Don't get me wrong. Some is really justifiable. But there are other times where I'm like,
what is he supposed to do?
Give him the benefit of the doubt?
What is he supposed to do in the situation that he's in? What is he supposed to do? Because
they completely changed what the offense was going to look like from Jeff Sims to Heinrich Harbert.
And they've admitted, they're like, we didn't have any option in the playbook. That's not a thing that we had. And then we're like, I'm surprised we haven't seen him like call up to Coach Osborne in the suite yet and be like, hey, what would you run here? Because we don't have anything in the playbook that works for the guys that are left on the roster.
Whoa. I knew he was going to play that clip. In my head, that's what was playing in my mind.
And that's essentially what's happening in the middle of the week. They're like, hey, you need to run the belly G option pass. And he's like, all right.
And next belly G.
And the next game, Malachi Coleman to the house on the option pass. You're like, they literally are just putting together a playbook on the fly because they have no one left.
It's me and Madden.
Pretty much.
Like they give me 3 play calls that seem right, and I'm like, I'll choose one of the 3.
Why not? YOLO. Let's do it. Right.
By the way, Mountain Holler, the off-brand of Mountain Dew, terrible.
Oh, so Mountain Holler, but you could only name 2 Mountain Dew flavors 2 weeks ago.
When I was growing up, we were poor, so I had to have Mountain Holler instead of Mountain Dew.
If you would have said Mountain Holler when we were playing that game last Monday, I would have lost my attitude.
I think we would have just shut it down. Just shut the whole thing down. Mountain Holler.
Good thing we played that game close to the end of the show.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And by the way,
half the time you walk off, you get mad.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Do you know the position Shane puts me in?
And by the way, when it comes to the press conference yesterday, he went 30 minutes, but I took a break halfway into it. And I came back.
You had a halftime for yourself?
I had halftime. I came back, and it was a dramatically different press conference in the back half than it was in the front half, because it was 15 minutes of injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was totally different at the end. And there was a lot of great stuff there at the end. And you really get the best audio clips and the best information from that press conference each week.
Ravi, can I follow up with something we talked about yesterday?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is the last time I'm going to talk about it, because I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Okay.
That's my Coach Rhule line of the day. So I read a ton into the officiating call with Cooper DeJean's punt return. Ton into it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I got to figure this out.
Yeah.
Like I got to learn more, at least in this moment, so that I don't get lost in something like this again. So first off, Bill, I believe it's Carollo, who's the Big Ten coordinator of officiating. He said this: "We don't do it often, but we felt this was a significant play in a heated contest." So that was
fair.
The changeover on the review.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was important that we at least be transparent and let you know the call, exactly why we made it. Okay, I'm going to start there. We felt this was a significant play in a heated contest. So you're telling me that if you review every college football play, that we'll just say the game in Houston, West Virginia from a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Houston
rolling out, they throw a deep ball. There's no pushing and shoving in the end zone for PI. There's no holding calls at the line of scrimmage. You didn't see any of that. Because that was a significant play. Let's just say Houston won on a 50-yard Hail Mary.
Yeah.
So when that play gets reviewed, there has to be something that you're like, well, that was kind of holding, but we're not going to actually call that holding, because like that, we're going to give a little bit of leeway with this call versus that call.
Sure.
That's strike one of why I'm not a huge fan of that. Then he goes into saying, Shaw stated that the rule was put in place to protect the runner, and also defended the idea that even a small waving motion constitutes an invalid fair catch signal. I only want to focus on that first part. The rule was put in place to protect the runner. If it was there to protect the runner, why did you let the play go?
Yeah.
Why wasn't the call made on the field?
Yeah.
Because if we're protecting everybody at that point, not just the runner.
Right.
We're protecting everybody on the football field.
Yeah.
Right? And then the question was the play reviewable? Once you go to replay, you have the chance to look at all aspects of the play. Something that I said yesterday.
That's not true, though.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said, per quote of Carollo.
Right, but like that's not true, because you can't go back and retroactively call pass interference in college.
Right.
That's not a thing you can do.
Right.
Like you can't review penalties in college. And there's, I think, still certain instances I think you can still review pass interference in the NFL, but that's it. Like you can't go back and review penalties.
And then
that's not true.
Then he goes, but the reality is the rule book is pretty black and white. We try to interpret it and try to use common sense when we apply the rules. We don't call everything a holding play, even if there's a grab, but we try to manage the game. But this is a pretty clear-cut definition of the rule that they enforced at a real tough time, the winning touchdown. Again, no, because you can't just pick and choose what rule you follow.
Yeah, because they didn't enforce it in the real time. They enforced it after the fact.
Correct. And also, when you bring up a holding call that you're like, I'm going to let the play go on and not
yeah, because they just go, hey, the rule book is pretty black and white. But we don't always call it.
You can't just pick and choose what you want to do.
No.
That was probably one of the worst overall.
Shouldn't have said anything. He shouldn't have said anything.
Overall, I don't know if it was a press conference because I'm reading it off of an article.
But shouldn't have said anything.
I'm going to call it a press conference. That's one of the worst overall statement gathering sessions I've ever heard.
Terrible.
Ever. And then the question was, and I thought this was a great question, even though we kind of talked about it yesterday, but what if DeJean hadn't been near the boundary? Would it have been reviewed? I'm like, that's kind of a good question. It was asked if the ball was caught in the middle of the field, would that play have been reviewed? Shaw took the question and did not directly respond to that, instead citing rules on fair catches versus invalid fair catches. Yeah, that's all I need to know.
Yeah, that means it's a no. It would not have been reviewed.
All right, I'm letting it go.
I don't even know why, but it's
I got it off
right?
my chest, but I just kind of wanted to read that to you because of how ridiculous
the
this
part
sounds.
The part of all aspects of a player reviewable is just simply not true. You can't retroactively enforce penalties. That's a real thing.
And again, don't get me wrong. A loss right there helps Nebraska in the long run.
Sure, yeah.
And as somebody that covers Nebraska and roots for Nebraska, I'm a fan. But I'm also a fan of Cooper DeJean.
Yeah, well, and it's also just...
And I'm a fan of just being fair and getting the call right.
I don't like it when people get hosed, right? Like that's a terrible look for the Big Ten. It's a terrible look for college football. And if you care about college football, you don't want those things, because it kind of makes you a joke, right? Like you don't want those things to be what defines your game. You want the excellence of your sport to define your game, not the blunders and whatever nonsense that was about. All aspects of a player are reviewable, except they're not. And the rule book's black and white, but we only enforce some of it.
Yeah, it's just so funny how he just contradicts everything. He's like, yeah, I'm going to get in front of the media, and I'm just going to let the media destroy me. Like that's what he did. He just walked in and said, yeah, guys, come after me, and I'm not going to give you anything. And what I'm going to say is actually going to sound worse than if I kept my mouth shut.
And I mean, who was clamoring for this statement? I mean, I get people were still talking about it, but give it like 2 days, people are going to move on. You're just keeping this thing alive, which is idiotic. I don't understand it.
Yeah, a couple of things on YouTube. I think Jack Mitchell on Twitter found in the rule book that you can't call a fair catch after the ball bounces too.
Yeah, that's what the invalid fair catch thing that we're talking about. But
they were referring to his left arm giving a mini motion as he's running to the football, nothing that goes above the shoulder pad, and that's what they called invalid fair catch for, which is still outrageous. Because here's what they also said. Oh my gosh, I forgot to include this. They also said, if you look at the on-field views from cameras, you can see that it didn't get above his shoulder pad. But when you look from a high angle, that's the only way to make that call via review.
Yeah.
And it looks like his arm goes above his helmet. It looks like. It wasn't, hey, it does. It looks like.
Yeah.
How do you overturn a call then if it only looks like that?
Yeah. No, I agree. And the thing with on that Jack Mitchell brought up on Twitter, that is accurate, that technically that is true, but that's where we're talking about how it's something that is never enforced. The thing we talked about yesterday, you sent me a video clip of basically over and over and over again, this is just not something that's called. And Dave says you can retroactively call targeting. Yes, but it's because they specifically made a rule to allow for, it's kind of like the NFL pass interference rule. They specifically had to make a rule in order to allow that to be reviewable. And that was to make sure you're not throwing guys out of the game that don't deserve it. They didn't, like, you have to specifically make exceptions to the rule of you can't review penalties. So, Dave, appreciate the point there. It's just a little bit different.
Again, it's off my chest. I'm done. Good.
Coming up next, we're going to actually set up the show probably. And we'll let you know what's coming up here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.